The harmattan wind had a way of biting through clothes, sliding under wrappers and coats, whispering into bones. That morning, in the small Igbo town of Umozu, it moved through the narrow, red-earth streets like a restless spirit, carrying with it the smell of wood smoke and the faint cry of a hawker selling roasted groundnuts. Inside a weather-worn, two-room mud house with a zinc roof that complained whenever the wind shifted, Kim sat on her low wooden stool, her hands moving with practiced rhythm over a basket of melon seeds she was separating. Her eyes, clouded and pale like unpolished glass, stared into a world she could no longer see. The dim light from the half-open window caught the lines on her face, the kind of lines life carves on a person who has known hunger, tears, and endurance. On the other side of the room, Adiz, her 22-year-old daughter, bent over a battered aluminum pot, stirring the last handful of gari they could afford into hot water. The smell of it, plain, unadorned, filled the room. No sugar, no milk, no groundnuts. Just hot gari to warm their stomachs against the cold. NWAM. Kim's voice was low and patient, the kind of voice that could calm a crying baby or soften a quarrel. How much do we have left for the week? Adiz hesitated, knowing her mother could hear the truth in her silence. Only 50 naira, mama. The older woman nodded slowly, her blind gaze fixed somewhere past the thin mud wall. We will manage. We have always managed. But Adiz's heart tightened. She knew managing meant skipping meals, smiling through hunger, pretending that everything was fine. For as long as she could remember, she had been the eyes, hands, and feet of the household. She had learned to walk with a steady, confident voice, to keep people from pitying her mother. Since childhood, she had been her mother's protector, guide, and provider, ever since Mama told her that Papa had died long before she was old enough to remember him. In the neighborhood, people whispered stories about them. Some pitied them, others used them as examples when warning their children. If you don't work hard in school, you will end up like Adiz, carrying the whole world on your head. But Adiz ignored them. She was always in motion, pounding yam for someone's party, helping in people's kitchens, washing clothes for busy traders, anything to earn a few naira. That morning, as she set 2 bowls of steaming gari on the low wooden table between them, Kim reached out, her hands finding the edge of the table without fumbling. Come, sit, she said. They ate in silence for a while, except for the faint clink of spoons against enamel bowls and the sound of the wind against the zinc roof. Then Kim sighed, the kind of sigh that carries unspoken worries. Your job with Madame Chioma. When is she coming back from her trip? She asked. Adiz's spoon slowed. She said she will be gone for a month, Mama. She left last week. And Kim's brows drew together slightly. And until then, Adiz swallowed hard. Until then, nothing, Mama. The truth was heavier than the gari in her stomach. Madame Chioma had been her lifeline for almost a year, paying her 3,000 naira a month to help in her small restaurant. It wasn't much, but it was steady, and she could sometimes take leftover food home. Without that job, their thin thread of stability was already fraying. Outside, a goat bleated somewhere, followed by the voices of children chasing each other in the dusty street. Adiz's gaze drifted to the open doorway, where the world outside seemed to call her with both promise and threat. She could feel time pressing on her, like harmattan dust settling over everything, and the unspoken truth that every day without income brought them closer to desperation. By afternoon, the sun had burned away the morning chill, and Adiz wrapped a faded scarf around her hair, took her mother's cane, and led her to the roadside. They sat together under the shade of an almond tree, hoping that perhaps someone from the community would need help and call her for work. But the hours slipped by with only passing greetings and sympathetic glances. When they returned home, hunger was waiting for them. That night, as they lay on their mats in the dark, Adiz listened to her mother's breathing, steady but shallow, and decided. Tomorrow, she would swallow her pride. If work wouldn't come to her, she would go to it. Even if it meant doing what she had always promised herself she would never do. The next day, dressed in her cleanest clothes, a faded blue skirt and white blouse with the collar fraying, Adiz guided her mother to the bustling junction in the center of town. The air there was alive with the smells of fried akara, the calls of bus conductors, and the bargaining shouts of traders. She found a quiet spot near a palm wine stand and spread out a small mat. There, with her mother beside her, she began to beg. It was the hardest thing she had ever done. Some people dropped coins without looking at her. Others threw words sharper than stones. Young girl like you begging? Go and find work. She smiled through the humiliation because her mother's hand was in hers, and that was enough. 2 days passed like that, begging, enduring, surviving. And then, in the middle of the third day, she overheard a conversation between two women carrying baskets of vegetables. They say Chief Obies is looking for a new house girl, one of them said. Adi's ears caught the name like a fishhook. He pays well, the other woman replied. But you must have strength. Oh, his wife is different. Before they even left the junction that day, Adiz had made up her mind. She would find her way to that house and ask for the job. Whatever different meant, it couldn't be worse than hunger. She had no way of knowing that the path she was about to take would not only feed them, but also tear open the shadows of a past her mother had buried for decades. A past in which the man who had died was still very much alive. The road to Chief Obi's mansion curved away from the noise of Omozu's main market and into a quieter lane lined with flamboyant trees, their red flowers scattering over the ground like spilled paint. The houses here were bigger, walls painted in fresh colors, gates high and intimidating. Adiz had never walked this far into this part of town. It felt like stepping into another world, one where the air seemed richer, the silence thicker, and every gate kept secrets. Her heart pounded as she reached the high black iron gates of the mansion. A uniformed security man sat on a plastic chair just inside, his radio murmuring a high-life tune. He looked her over from head to toe, the way people did when they were measuring your worth in silence, then raised an eyebrow. Yes? Who are you looking for? His voice carried the easy authority of someone who enjoyed guarding rich people's space. I heard Chief Obies needs a house girl, Adiz said, keeping her voice steady though her palms were damp. I came to apply. The man chuckled, a short, disbelieving sound. Do you know the kind of people that work here? This is not the small work you're thinking of. I can work, she replied simply. There was no room for pride when hunger was already inside your home. The security man shrugged and dialed a number on the intercom phone beside the gate. A few minutes later, the smaller pedestrian gate clicked open. Go inside. Madam will see you, he said. Adiz stepped into a compound so large it felt like it could be its own village square. The driveway curved around a manicured lawn dotted with rose bushes and trimmed hedges. At the far end, the main house rose like a palace. White walls gleaming under the sun, windows tall and dressed with gold curtains. Even the air smelled different here, a mix of perfume, polished wood, and the faint aroma of something frying in the kitchen. She climbed the marble steps to the front door, where a tall woman stood waiting. Her dress was a rich Ankara print in shades of wine and gold jewelry glittered on her wrists and ears. Her eyes, sharp as cut glass, traveled over Adiz with the same slow inspection the gate man had given, only colder. So you're the one looking for work? She said. Yes, ma. Adiz replied, lowering her gaze respectfully. I am Lolo Uju, chief's wife. Do you know what it means to work in this house? Adiz swallowed. It means to serve well, ma. The woman smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that warmed the air. Serve well? We will see. She led Adiz through a grand sitting room where a giant chandelier hung from the ceiling like a captured sun, scattering light over leather sofas and a flat-screen TV larger than the wall in Adiz's entire home. Family portraits hung in gold frames. Pictures of Chief, a broad-chested man in his late 50s with a smile that looked rehearsed, Lolo Uju herself, always in expensive lace, and a young woman who could only be their daughter, Amarachi, her beauty matched only by the confidence in her eyes. You will start tomorrow, Lolo Uju said briskly, as if she had already decided Adiz's fate before the interview even began. You will wash, cook, clean, iron, and run errands. No excuses. And her eyes narrowed slightly. Stay away from my daughter's things. And from my husband. Are we clear? Yes, ma. She handed Adiz a small slip of paper with instructions on when to report the next day. No talk of salary, no questions about her background. It was as if the decision had been made long before she walked in, and Adiz couldn't tell if that was a blessing or a warning. The next morning, she arrived at the mansion before sunrise. By 7, she had already scrubbed the front veranda, polished the marble floors, and carried 2 full baskets of laundry to the washing line. Every task led to another, like an endless chain. The kitchen was a battlefield, dirty pots stacked high, dishes crusted with last night's stew, and a mountain of vegetables to chop. The cook, a stout woman named Mama Felicia, barely looked at her except to give instructions. By mid-morning, Adiz met Amarachi for the first time in person. The young woman swept into the sitting room in a silk robe, yawning as if the world existed only to serve her comfort. "Who's that?" Amarachi asked, pointing lazily at Adiz. "The new help," her mother replied from the sofa, flipping through a glossy magazine. Amarachi's eyes moved over Adiz, and her lips curved into a smirk. She looks obedient. Let's hope she stays that way." From that day, Amarachi treated her less like a human and more like a shadow that existed to follow orders. She would leave her clothes scattered everywhere, dishes half-eaten, and call Adiz with a sharp clap of her hands. If Adiz was slow to respond, she would hear, "Are you deaf?" Sometimes, Amarachi would complain that the water was too cold, too hot, or that Adiz's village hand was spoiling her clothes. Adiz swallowed every insult, reminding herself that each month's pay meant food in her mother's stomach. One evening, Adiz overheard Lolo Uju speaking on the phone in the dining room. "Yes, Chief's daughter will meet him next week. Everything is set. Politician's son, very wealthy. This marriage will secure everything." Adiz understood then. Amarachi was about to be matched with the son of another rich man. She had seen such arrangements before, money meeting money, power shaking hands with power. Love was never part of the contract. 2 days later, Lolo Uju summoned her. "You will go with Amarachi to meet her future husband, just to keep her company, and carry her things." "Yes, ma." That small errand, Adiz didn't know, would be the beginning of a storm that would blow open the gates of the past and pull her into a truth she had never imagined. The morning they were to visit Amarachi's intended husband, the mansion was in a flurry. A makeup artist arrived before sunrise, unpacking boxes filled with shimmering powders, lipsticks, and palettes that looked like they belonged in a magazine shoot. A hairstylist followed, dragging a portable dryer and bags of hair extensions. Amarachi sat like a queen in the center of her room, sipping juice through a straw while the women worked on her as though she were a priceless artifact. Adiz stood quietly by the door, holding a large designer bag filled with Amarachi's shoes, perfumes, and spare clothes. She had been instructed to wear something neat but not distracting. That meant a plain brown skirt, a cream blouse, and her hair tied back. Even in her modest dress, she knew her beauty had a way of showing. But here, in this house, beauty was a dangerous thing. She kept her head down. By the time Amarachi was ready, her face glowed under expertly applied makeup, and her hair cascaded in waves. Her mother clapped her hands in satisfaction. "You look like a senator's wife already." "Please, Mummy," Amarachi replied with a sly smile. "I will be more than a senator's wife. You'll see." The black SUV waited in the compound, its paint gleaming in the sun. Amarachi took the back seat, Adiz sliding in beside her as ordered. A driver in a crisp white shirt handled the wheel, while Amarachi spent most of the ride scrolling on her phone and humming along to loud Afropop music. Adiz looked out of the tinted window, watching the town change as they drove. The busy markets and dusty streets gave way to wide, paved roads lined with tall trees. Gates here were taller, houses set farther back, guarded by security men in dark glasses. Her stomach tightened. She had never been this deep into wealth's territory. They arrived at a sprawling cream-colored mansion surrounded by a tall black fence. The gate swung open before the car even stopped, and they rolled into a driveway paved with interlocking stones. 2 men were already waiting near the entrance. Both were tall, well-dressed, and carried themselves with the kind of confidence that comes from money. They looked so alike in the quality of their clothes and the way they laughed together that it was impossible to guess which one was the rich man's son. Amarachi barely glanced at them before her eyes fixed on one, the slightly shorter of the two, dressed in a sharp blue kaftan. She leaned toward Adiz and whispered, "That must be him. Fine boy." The taller man in a white linen shirt stepped forward first. "Welcome," he said warmly, his voice deep and measured. "You must be Amarachi." Amarachi blinked, surprised. "Oh, I thought." She caught herself, then smiled with practiced charm. "Nice to meet you." But her charm didn't last long. Within minutes of being inside, Amarachi's voice rose above the conversation. She complained about the heat, demanded cold drinks, with ice cubes, please, and when a young maid brought them, she scolded her for not bringing straws. The taller man in white, the one she had barely looked at, was polite but quiet, his gaze steady on her as if measuring every word. The man in blue kaftan, who turned out to be his best friend and personal assistant, tried to lighten the mood with jokes. Amarachi laughed with him and ignored the one she had actually come to meet. It was during one of her complaints, this time about the fabric on the sitting room chairs, that the situation took a sharp turn. Amarachi gestured toward Adiz, who had been standing silently in the corner. See? Even my maid would not make such choices. Adiz, don't you agree? Adiz's heart pounded. She didn't want to be dragged into this. I think the chairs are fine, Ma, she said carefully. Amarachi rolled her eyes. Oh, please. You always side with strangers. The taller man in white spoke for the first time in a while. What's her name? He asked, looking directly at Adiz. Adiz stepped forward slightly. Adiz, sir. His voice softened. You've been standing all this while. Please sit. Amarachi scoffed. Oh, so now you're talking to my maid. Feel free. You two can be friends, or whatever. I don't care. Later, when the conversation paused and Amarachi excused herself to take a phone call, Adiz saw her chance. She walked up to the man in white, her hands clasped together respectfully. Sir, I'm sorry for my madam's approach earlier. We are both sorry, she said quietly. His eyes studied her, not with the judgment she expected, but with something almost like amusement. You're apologizing for something you didn't do. It's only right, sir, she replied. A faint smile touched his lips. You have a good heart. She nodded slightly and returned to her place, unaware that this small exchange had shifted something in the air. The real storm came days later, at the grand family meeting arranged by both sides. Adiz was told to attend as Amarachi's helper, serving drinks and carrying handbags. When the introductions began, it was the taller man in white who stepped forward to greet Amarachi formally and reveal himself as Chinidu, the actual son of the powerful politician. The man in the blue kaftan was simply his best friend and PA. Gasps rippled around the room. Amarachi's painted smile faltered. Chinidu turned to the elders and said calmly, like she said the other day, I should go for someone low life, like me. I found her, and it's not Amarachi. He looked straight at Adiz. The room exploded into shocked murmurs. Amarachi's face burned with humiliation. Her mother's voice rose, accusing Adiz of witchcraft, of stealing her daughter's man. Before Adiz could even explain, Lolo Uju's hand clamped around her arm. Get out of my house. Over my dead body will you work here another day? And just like that, Adiz was thrown out, with no pay for the months she had labored from dawn to midnight. That night, she wept in her mother's arms, telling Kim everything. When she finished, Kim's voice was cold with a steel Adiz had never heard before. Then tomorrow, you will take me there. They will pay you, or I will not leave their gate. She could not have known that stepping back into that compound would unlock a past that had been buried for decades and change everything. The sun was already high when Adiz tied her mother's headscarf the next morning. It was a faded blue gelly, but she wrapped it with the same care she would give to something new. Kim sat patiently on the edge of her mat, hands folded, listening to her daughter's every move. Are you ready, Mama? Adiz asked softly. I have been ready for years, Kim replied, her voice calm but firm. Let's go and see the people who think they can eat another person's sweat without paying. Adiz guided her out of the small house, the wooden walking stick tapping against the red earth road. Passers-by glanced at them curiously, a young woman walking with such urgency, her blind mother keeping pace beside her, jaw set like someone going to war. The black iron gates of Chief Obi's mansion looked even taller that morning. The security man from before sat in his chair, chewing roasted groundnuts and reading a newspaper. What is it this time? He asked, raising an eyebrow. We came to collect my pay, Adiz said. The man smirked. Madam say she no go pay you. I no one waste your time. We are not leaving until we speak to her, Kim said, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. The guard shrugged and picked up the intercom. Minutes later, the smaller gate opened. Lolo Uju was standing on the front steps, her arms crossed, Amarachi hovering just behind her. What nonsense is this? She demanded. You owe my daughter for the month she worked here, Kim said. We are here for her money. Money. Lolo Uju's laugh was cold. Over my dead body will I pay a girl who used witchcraft to steal my daughter's man. We are not here for arguments, Kim replied evenly. Just pay her for the work she did. By now, Chief Obis himself had come out from inside. His deep voice boomed across the compound. What is going on here? She brought her blind mother to beg for money, Lolo Uju said dismissively. Chief's gaze shifted to Nkem and froze. His face drained of color. Nkem, Adi's head snapped toward him. You know my mother? The blind woman's head tilted slightly, her nostrils flaring as though catching a familiar scent. That voice. Obis. Chief took a step forward. It's me. Nkem, it's me. After all these years. After all these years? Nkem's voice trembled but did not break. You abandoned us. You left me to raise our daughter alone. You told the world I was nothing. And now you cannot even pay her for cleaning your floors. Wait. Adi's voice shook. You're my father? Chief's eyes filled with tears. Yes, my daughter. I didn't know. I thought. His words tangled in his throat. You didn't know? Nkem's voice rose. You didn't know because you chose not to know. You chose her. She pointed toward Lolo Uju. Your secretary, who came into my home, turned you against me, and took everything. You chased me out like a dog. Gasps came from the few workers standing at the edges of the compound. Amarachi's face twisted in shock. She even got blind years after you threw her away, Adiz said, her voice breaking. Do you know what it's like to beg on the roadside with your mother? Do you know how many insults I've swallowed just to keep us alive? Chief was already crossing the space between them. He took Nkem's hands gently. I was a fool. I let lies poison my heart. Please forgive me. Lolo Uju's voice cut in, sharp as a blade. Obis, are you going to believe this? Enough, Chief roared. You told me she abandoned me. You told me our child died. All these years you lied. Lolo Uju faltered. I did what I had to. What you had to. Chief's voice was thunder now. Pack your things. Today. Amarachi stepped forward, trembling. Daddy, go inside, he ordered. And prepare to learn some manners. Because if you want to marry into the kind of family I have planned for you, you will not behave like your mother. In the days that followed, Chief moved Nkem and Adiz into a beautiful new bungalow on the edge of town, furnished, stocked, and guarded. He arranged for the best doctors in the city to examine Nkem's eyes. After surgery and weeks of treatment, she opened her eyes one morning to see her daughter's face for the first time in decades. You're even more beautiful than I imagined, Nkem whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. Chief, who had been visiting every day, broke down completely at that moment. I missed everything, your childhood, your laughter, your struggles. I will not miss another day. Chinidu, the politician's son, came to visit often. He had already made his feelings clear at that fateful meeting, and now that the truth was out, there was nothing standing in the way. He spoke to Nkem respectfully, always bringing small gifts and asking after her health. One quiet afternoon, under the shade of the almond tree outside their new home, Chinidu took Adiz's hand. I don't care where you came from. I care where we're going. She smiled, her heart lighter than it had ever been. Then let's go there together. On the day of their traditional engagement, the compound was alive with music, dancing, and the smell of jollof rice and ofensala. Chief sat proudly beside Nkem, their hands intertwined as though no time had passed. Lolo Uju and Amarachi were absent, by choice or by shame, no one knew. As the drums beat and the dancers swirled, Nkem leaned toward her daughter and whispered, We have come from the dust to the palace, Adiz. Never forget where you came from, but never let it hold you back. Adiz looked across the courtyard at Chinidu, waiting with a smile that promised a new chapter. She took her mother's hand. They had survived the shadows of the past. Now, together, they would walk into the light.